the part to your left is going to be higher. Which means if you turn to the left, you're essentially going uphill. You have less space, so parts can hit the ground a lot more easily because you have less room to work with. You're essentially driving on a hill. So naturally you will slide down the hill. So slide to the outside of the road, and you'll actually have to fight it to go in a straight line. So to hold the straight line, you're going to essentially have a very soft push going on to cause the bike to be in a very gentle turn in towards the crown portion of the road in order to track straight. But when making those turns to the left, you need to be very careful and very aware of the fact that you have less room underneath your foot on the left side than you do on the right side. And that's going to change how you take those turns. Railroad tracks and trolley tracks are built into the road surface, and they're going to cause some consternation now and then too. In this case, you have smooth pieces of metal bordered by nothingness, air. So essentially, you have these two locations that you have little to no traction. The other problem you run into is that gap that they leave for the trolley wheels or the train wheels could be big enough to grab your wheel. Depends on the bike. Some bikes have very narrow front tires, and if you hit it at the wrong angle, your tire will slip down into that groove. So when we approach tracks, we want to approach them at least a 45-degree angle, preferably a 90. But at least a 45. We also need to be careful about staying in our lane. So if you look at the image here on the slide, what the rider has done, even though the tracks cross at a 45-degree angle, the rider has moved himself to the outside of the lane. As he reaches the tracks, he makes a quick turn and crosses the tracks at a 90 degree. And then, before he winds up in the other lane of traffic, turns back. Another irregularity you're going to run into on the roads are when they're making repairs to the roads, or there are problems with the road, such as a pothole or a bump, a bad paving job, or like the image, they're getting ready to repave. Our assessment when dealing with these things is that you're going to have reduced traction because there's not a solid road surface in many cases. It could be broken or cracked and shifting. And this can cause the bike to wander, vibrate, or wiggle. So our action is to avoid them if you can. Any surface that is not really there to support you, you don't want to be on. If you find yourself on that surface, you want to get off of it as quickly as you can. You find the edge and you cross it at least a 45-degree angle. Closer to 90 is better, but at least a 45. So looking at the edge there in the image, if you were to approach that edge to climb up onto the smoother pavement, and you hit it at less than a 45-degree angle, you risk your tire not being able to climb up, and now it's just skidding across the edge, and that's going to be very scary. So a 45-degree angle at least, steady speed, lift up off the seat, save your lower back, and look where you want to go. There are times of year that something gets on the road surface that's not normally there that really causes problems. And these are extreme surfaces. In this case, we're talking ice and snow, wet leaves. The fall is a wonderful time to ride. Right after a storm is really cool, except the roads are extremely hazardous because the Leaves are there, they're all wet. You have little to no traction. To this list, I am also going to add, for this time of year, freshly mown grass. When dealing with these surfaces, you're going to have little to no traction. Okay, your tires are going to slip and slide all over the place on these things. So you need to be very careful when dealing with them. In fact, if you do not have to deal with them, don't. Right? If you know they're there, like I said, fall's a beautiful time to ride. Leaves are falling, but if there's a lot of leaves on the road and it just rained, yeah, I'm not going out this. I'm going to let those leaves get pushed off the road first. If you don't have a choice and you're out, you have to deal with them. You want to set your speed prior to getting onto the surface. Right? Something nice and slow and gentle that you can control. And we're going to squeeze the clutch. This is an unusual thing. Whenever you go through a turn or maneuver, you want to make sure that the bike is underpowered. That actually gives you more control. But in this case, we do not want to risk the tire doing something that we don't want it to do. So we're going to coast. We're going to glide across it in a straight line, shortest distance possible. If there are existing tire tracks, they've pushed some stuff out of the way, that's your best bet. But we want to make no input changes at all if we can help it. Right? Straight across, straight line, coasting, that's the safest thing for dealing with these surfaces. All right. Sometimes the problem can move. So let's dig a little bit here into animals. Since I have a little bit more knowledge in this, I'm going to impart some wisdom to you guys. So we're going to talk about small animals here. Talk about squirrels and rabbits, chipmunks. I love to put in quail, but not duck or geese, but they're in there too. We're talking about, in this case, prey animals. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight on how animals think. Right? This is my college experience happening here. So, prey animals, like the ones you see that are listed here, something to understand about them, their eyes are on the side of the head. This gives them a very wide field of view, so they can see a lot. What it doesn't give them is depth perception. They don't understand or comprehend distances the way you and I do. They don't think that way. That brings up the next point, the fact of how they think. Animals don't have logic and reason like we do. Animals think very simply. Am I safe? Am I not safe? Those two thoughts. Everything that the animal does is based on those two thoughts and the fact of, do I see something that's going to hurt me, or am I safe? So when you try to outthink one of these animals, you go, well, that was a stupid move. No, it's because you're thinking on a different level than the animal is. So you're using different information. So when we're dealing with small animals like this, they don't think like we do, they don't know what we know, and therefore they can wind up in the road, and if they wind up in the road, we can hit them, and if we hit them, they're going to cause a thump. Right? We're going to run them over. They're small enough to go under our wheels, during which we could lose traction. Now, when we're dealing with small animals, the best action that we can do is drive in a straight line, stay up and down. Don't attempt to avoid them. Like I said, they don't think like we do. This is why an animal like a squirrel will run completely across the road, almost get to the other shoulder, turn around and run back. Because he got scared to the point that he ran somewhere he knew he was safe. And you don't know where that is. But you're like, but 2 more feet he would have been safe. But he doesn't know that. He doesn't think that way. He can't tell distance. So he ran to where he knew it was safe. So when you have an animal in the middle of the road going to go where they think is safe. And if you try to guess where that is, you're most likely going to be wrong. That brings up another thing of animals. Predators hunt by motion. So the first line of defense that an animal has to be safe, a prey animal, is to stand absolutely still. They are attempting to become part of the background. This is why when I take my dog for a walk, there can be a bunny rabbit sitting in the grass 10 feet away, and if that rabbit does not move, my dog will not react to it. But the moment an ear twitches, her head whips around, and now we're off to the races. Speaking of races, let's talk about animals that chase. So in this case, we're talking about dogs. Okay? Dogs like to catch things. That's what they do. That's what they were bred for. It's in their blood. Here's the fun thing. Dogs are doing math. So dogs look at a target. They are predators, so they can tell distance, they can tell speed, and they calculate angles to figure out where it has to run to and how fast it has to get there in order to catch something. So when you're riding along and a dog starts running towards you, he's done some math to figure out some basic geometry. This is where I need to go so that my target and I get there at the same time. We combat that by messing with the math. So if we have a dog that starts to chase us, the first thing we do is we slow down. The dog then has to change his angle, he changes his speed, he redoes his math. I'm not running there, I'm now running there. The dog changes where it's running, and as soon as the dog does that, we speed up and we get out of the kill zone. So now when the dog gets there, we're not there anymore. Your feet are on the pegs, control your balance, eyes looking straight ahead, track in with your peripheral vision. Don't look at them because then you'll turn towards them. Just slow down, let them adjust, speed up, and you escape. So let's step back to prey animals again, but we're going to go to the big ones now. Okay? So in this case, we got deer, we got elk, and less likely around here, things like bison. But for the most part, you can usually spot these guys because they're big enough. Yeah, the woods around here can hide a lot of things, but you'll often spot them early enough that you can do something about it. So the same rules apply to these guys that did the little ones. They stand still when they feel danger. If they feel threatened, they will run to where they feel safe. Which makes them unpredictable. Well, actually, they're very predictable. It's just you don't have any way of knowing where their safe spot is or what actually is going to spook them to the point that they're going to move. If you see one, there's more than one, right? These traveling groups, herds. So when you see a deer run across the road, is that the first one, the last one, or the middle one? If you see one on the side of the road, you have to anticipate that it will cross the road. If it's sitting on the side of the road, it's all nice and safe. I don't have to worry about it. But if it gets spooked, it will run where it knows that it's safe, and that might actually be across the road. So when we see these guys, we want to slow down. We want to give them time to do what they need to do, get where they need to go, get out of our way. You might even have to come to a stop if there's enough of them in the road. I actually have had to do this with deer. I was about 10 years ago coming around Westchester on the 100 bypass, and I got off 202, and there's 3 deer in the middle of the road. And I came to a stop. And that's when I realized that I had 8 on one side and another 7 on the other side. I was in the middle of the herd. I was completely surrounded. And so I basically had to sit there and wait for them to decide that I wasn't a big deal, so they all wandered off. Because if I did anything, I risked them panicking, and that could just get ugly. So you might have to stop and wait for them. You might have, if they have absolutely no desire to move. If anyone's ever dealt with a herd of bison, that's like arguing with a VW microbus. You might have to turn around and go another way. So, out on the roads, we're not only going to be dealing with road conditions and animals, but we're going to have to deal with the environment. And a big factor of that is the wind. The wind can come in gusts, or it can be steady. It can change rapidly. It can change direction without warning. It can be caused by different things. So when we're dealing with the wind, our assessment is that the bike can get pushed around, that you are small and light and the wind doesn't care. So when we're dealing with the wind, we want to think about our space cushion. We want to think about what room we have around us, and adjust our lane position to be able to absorb any problems that we may have for that. If the wind is strong enough, you're going to have to steer into it in order to fight it. A couple of years ago, I was on my way to teach at Norristown. It was March, so it was really cold. There was a really strong wind coming from the east. So I'm coming up 202, and the wind is pushing me on the right side. So I am pushing the right hand grip, so I'm in a perpetual right turn to fight the wind. The road then begins to turn, so now I'm pushing harder. So now I'm essentially in a sharp right turn, but because of the wind, I'm in a gentle right turn. And then the wind stopped. Not only did it stop, the universe decided to really mess with me at that moment, and a gust of wind punched me from the left. And myself and the bike went from the left side of the lane almost to the shoulder before I could get it corrected. So things can happen very rapidly. You always need to be paying attention. We want to stay relaxed. That helps keep us ready to do something. Remember, when you get tense, everything becomes jerky. One fun thing, even more entertaining than the wind, that you're going to run into are traffic actuated signals. So, here's a question for you. Does anyone know or want to guess what the average length of a red light in the United States is?
Like
45 seconds.
3 minutes.
Yeah, time-wise. So, okay, I heard 3 minutes. Anybody else have a guess?
Minute and a
30
half.
seconds.
A minute, 30 seconds. Okay. So a minute and a half, 3 minutes. Okay. So the average length of a red traffic light in the United States is 45 seconds. Yeah, I know it feels forever. That's because you're sitting there not doing anything. Now, some roads, because cross traffic tends to be heavier or lighter, they will change the timing. But the majority of lights, especially in the cities, you run across are going to be 45 seconds for a red light. So 45 seconds, of that 45, roughly 11 of it is a yellow light for the other side and the rest of it is green. Bring that up for a very specific reason. When you have an intersection where the cross traffic is heavier in one direction than another, they change the timing of the lights. if it is a dramatic or drastic change, especially throughout the day, they will put in an actuated signal. This means that the light will only react when there's a vehicle wanting to come across. The most common one you're going to see are the seams in the pavement, little metal strips. These metal strips have a low power electrical current running through them that creates a magnetic field. The mass of the car over top of it distorts the field and tells the signal there's something there. The problem on a motorcycle is, depending upon the bike, we are not large enough to distort the signal. So what we want to do is we want to do everything we can to try to tell it we're there. And the first thing is to put the bike right on top of one of those metal strips. Okay? So when you pull up, you usually have what looks like two boxes made by the metal strip. You have these two boxes. Do not park in the box. They're not pressure activated. It's the metal strip. You want to put your tire, front tire and rear tire right on one of those metal strips. That puts it right underneath the body of the bike. That's the best chance for distorting the field and telling the light to exist. Newer signals, the little boxes, the little round discs, they could be white, they could be black. Those are usually video keyed. The newest ones actually respond to our headlights, which is awesome. The first generation still considered motorcycles to be either large animals or pedestrians. Couldn't tell the difference. They just saw something moving and we weren't big enough to be a car. So in some situations, you're going to wind up at one of these lights and it's not going to know you're there. And that, then you got to start thinking about what your options are. Often, if I can, I will pull further forward if there's a car behind me, and I have actually turned and waved that car up to get him onto the grid to trigger it. If there's no car there, obviously you can't do that. So some places there are laws that exist that give us options.
Pennsylvania has one of those laws.
Yes, we're talking about that. We're talking about that right now. So this falls under the ride-on red laws. So there are several laws that fall under that category. The most common that you're all familiar with on a ride-on red law is, unless otherwise posted, you can turn right. In this case, there might be a law, it's not everywhere, sorry, that if the motorcycle has been at the intersection for a certain amount of time, and sometimes they'll spell this out, sometimes they won't. Usually it's about 4 or 5 minutes. And that's why I mentioned the length of a red light before. When I pull up to an intersection, my bike actually has a clock in the speedometer. And I pull up, the first thing I do is I look at the clock. And if I am still there in 4 minutes, I'm pretty sure that light doesn't see me. Actually, it's usually about 2.5 minutes. I'm sure that thing doesn't see me. So now I got to start thinking about my options. So the ride-on red law that falls under this particular situation states that if a sufficient amount of time, usually about 5 minutes, has passed and the light has not reacted, if the way is clear, the rider may proceed. So in essence, you're able to drive through the red light. Here's the problem. Laws change. Okay? So this law may exist in one place and not somewhere else. I can tell you, Philadelphia does not let you do that. Okay? Most of Chester County does. Norristown does, but Conshohocken doesn't. I believe Doylestown does, but no, Horsham does, Doylestown doesn't. It's one of those things that hopefully you won't run into all that often. The other problem with this is that you might be completely within the rights of the law. You may be following it perfectly. But if I'm sitting there for 5 minutes, the light hasn't changed, so there's no cross traffic, I decide I'm going to go. So I begin to go through the intersection to go straight or to make a left-hand turn. At that moment, a police car turns the corner down the block. All that officer sees is that I am going through a red light. Therefore, that officer is completely within his rights of the law to pull me over. And I now have to convince him that I have been sitting there for 5 minutes. If I cannot convince the officer, I'm going to have to go convince the judge. And if I cannot convince the judge, I will have a ticket, even though I was completely within my rights. So just be aware of that. Doesn't happen often. There are some places in Downingtown that have actuated lights that when traffic gets low, I know they don't see the bike. I just don't go through those intersections that time of night. So we're out riding along, dealing with traffic lights and the wind and small animals, but eventually we're going to get somewhere, we're going to park. So when we park, we want to use the space to our benefit. It means we want to be visible in it. Nothing is more annoying, and I'm sure you will all agree, than driving down a crowded parking lot looking for a space. You see a gap between two cars, there's no shadow on the ground, you begin to pull in, and there's this itty-bitty smart car pulled all the way forward. You want to put the bike where it can be seen. The further into the parking space you are, the more likely a car is going to pull in before it sees it. And the bikes are small, they can get crunched before they know it's there. So we want to leave it more towards the exit. You either back in or back out. Backing in is safer. Driving out is safer than backing out. To parallel park on the side of the road, we want to back the bike in about a 45-degree angle. That way oncoming traffic can see that you're there and they don't try to pull into the space. We want to put the rear tire against the curb if it's legal. There's another one of those fun ones, the changes. About 92 to 95% of the state wants your rear tire against the curb. Lancaster County wants your tire against the curb. Chester County wants your tire against the curb. Delaware County depends on where you are. Philadelphia does not want you against the curb. It all has to do somewhere with drainage and clogging the side of the road. But that's one of those laws that unfortunately you usually discover it by coming out of wherever you were and walking over to your motorcycle and finding a ticket on the seat, which is how I discovered about Philadelphia. So, yeah. Anyway, once the bike is parked, we want to secure it. Okay? We want to make sure it doesn't go anywhere while we're not there. So that means turning the handlebars into the side stand and locking the forks. We're also going to leave the bike in gear. Okay? If the handlebars are turned and the forks are locked, which is another key setting, the bike can only go in a circle. If you leave it in gear, it will not roll. So now if someone wants to move the thing, they've got to pick it up. During the hot parts of the year, it is possible that the surface, especially the dark pavement, can get heated up to the point that it's soft. Now, we don't notice it, cars don't notice it because our weight is spread over a larger area, but you've got several hundred pounds of the motorcycle leaning on the little side stand, like 1 square inch. And if it's hot enough, it's warm enough, that can then begin to sink into the asphalt. So to stop that from happening, we just put something under it. Okay? I ride in my saddlebags. I have a piece of plywood that I cut years ago and sanded down the edges. And if I'm not certain about the surface, whether it's something that can sink in, whether it's sand or gravel, I'll throw that thing under there, spread the weight out. Now I know the bike's not going to go anywhere. There are shops and things you can find online. They sell pucks, that little plastic pieces. You can do that. I've seen people just stomp cans and put it under there. So whatever you need to do, just put some under it to spread the weight. So let's review. Where should you look when crossing obstacles?
Straight ahead.
Yeah, get ahead. What approach angle is recommended for crossing an obstacle?
90 degrees.
90.
90, preferable at least a 45. What indicates a potential change in roadway traction?
Change in color.
Color.
Color, yes. How should you ride across low traction surfaces?
Reduce but steady speed.
Slowly.
Yep. Nice and steady. Reduce your speed. No abrupt changes. Try to be as smooth as possible. What should you do if you come upon deer alongside the road? Let's assume it's alive.
Slow down and assume that there are more of them.
Yeah, slow down. There's going to be more of them. Let him figure out what's going on so that he doesn't be surprised. And what should you do if you suspect your side stand will sink?
Disperse the weight with something else.
Yep, put some under it. All right. Okay, so now we've talked about things out on the road that make it more difficult to ride. Now we're going to talk about things that we do to ourselves, or that can happen to ourselves to make it more difficult to ride. So our objective here is to look at impairments and to understand how things like alcohol and drugs and other impairments affect the motorcycle's ability to ride safely, and to be willing to intervene to prevent other riders who are impaired. Finally, how to identify those impairments. So fatality research, right? Research into motorcycle deaths has shown that alcohol is a leading cause. I would be amazed if that surprised anybody.
Nope.
Alcohol is the leading cause in motorcycle fatalities. Used to be for cars too, but it's not anymore. Anybody know what the number one for automobiles is?
Texting. Cell phones.
Cell phones. Just cell phones in general. Texting is the worst, but even just talking on them or doing something on the screen. Yeah. Cell phones took over the number one slot back in 2005, 2004, I think. Before that, it was alcohol. 34% of riders killed in Pennsylvania had a positive blood alcohol concentration. They weren't even drunk. They just had it in their system. Now, some of them probably were drunk. But 1 in 3 had alcohol in their system. The big problem is that riders do not want to leave their motorcycles behind. It's a really weird situation. It's absolutely hysterical. I have seen people who are more concerned and pay more attention to their motorcycles than they do their families. Okay? They baby their bikes, but the kids will play in traffic. Oh, you want to flirt with my wife? Sure, no problem, but don't dare touch my bike. Okay. We don't want to leave the bike behind. I understand that. Because I go out somewhere and I get a little tipsy, I call an Uber. I don't know if the bike's going to be there in the morning. So that's a risk. We don't want to leave them behind. Fatality research has also shown that the skills that we use to keep ourselves safe are hampered, become more difficult, and even disappear when we are inebriated. Our attention and our judgment, which we use to keep ourselves safe, degrade and disappear. Our balance degrades and disappears. And our hand-eye coordination, our ability to do multiple tasks at the same time. Okay? We just started learning the last couple of days. Right? We stopped the bike. Both hands squeeze, both feet press. So your left hand is doing something, your right hand is doing something, your left foot is doing something, your right foot is doing something, and your eyes are doing something all at the same time. And now you're going to have coordination problems. To become impaired means to make worse. Alcohol begins to impair you with the first drink. Okay? Here we go down the rabbit hole. I know what some of you are thinking. Pay attention. Okay? One drink begins to impair you. Whether that drink is a 12-ounce beer, 5 ounces of wine, or one shot of hard liquor, whether by itself or in mixed form, they all have the same effect on your body. The first thing to go when you're impaired is your ability to recognize you're impaired. Your judgment begins to lapse and get weak. We begin to take risks without thinking through the consequences. Okay? This is what for those of us that grew up in the 70s and 80s, you can identify with the, hey guys, watch this crowd. We don't notice it because it's so subtle and happening so slowly to us that we do not notice that it's happening. And we believe we're fine, right? I've got a good tolerance. I'm good. I do this all the time. It's not a big deal. The moment you're saying that, you're already fighting the fact that it's happening. When we're impaired, we have trouble with our divided attention. We have trouble doing multiple things at once. Our vision is compromised. Now, I'm not talking about seeing double, blurred vision, the room spinning. If you got to that point, you were already around the bend. One of the first things that happens with alcohol is that the small muscles in your eye that help adjust focus begin to slow down. So it takes longer for your eyes to make adjustments. Now, when I say longer, I'm talking about going from a tenth of a second to going to half a second, or even a second. If there's a change in light, it's even more pronounced. When you're looking at something and your eye then looks somewhere else, you change focus. If there's a change in light, you have to change to that as well. And that also slows down. So here's a situation I want you to think about. You're on the road at night, driving down the highway. A car is coming towards you with its headlights. So now you have bright lights coming at you. Your eyes adjust to that. That car goes away. Now it gets dark. Your eyes have to adjust to the darkness now. Alcohol slows that adjustment down. So now you're on the highway driving along at 65 miles an hour. And your eye has to adjust from the bright lights to the darkness. And instead of taking a tenth or 2/10 of a second, it takes a full second. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? Except remember this, we talked about it when turning. At 65 miles an hour, you're traveling at 100 feet per second. So that's 100 feet of road that you were essentially blind for. What can happen in 100 feet?
A lot.
A lot. The blood alcohol concentration is legally defined for being drunk as having 0.08 for anyone over the age of 21. So you're allowed to have in your system up to 0.08 before the law steps in and intervenes. If you're over the age of 21. Now if you're under the age of 21, it's 0.02. So we got a double standard here. There's a reason for that. Judgment impairment begins well before the legal limit. So even though you're not legally drunk, you're slowed down. You're having problems with your balance. You're having problems with your judgment. You're not following through all those things that we do to keep ourselves safe while we're riding. And you're putting yourself at greater risk. Each drink raises your blood alcohol content roughly 0.02%. Which is why under the age of 21 is 0.02, because you're not supposed to have it in your system. Now, Unit 9 and Appendix C in the handbook go into more detail on this. We're going to stop talking about it. We beat this horse enough. We're going to move on. But take a look at those two sections. There's more information in there that's been helpful and is important to know. But let's take a look at alcohol and what it does to the A3 strategy. Remember, the A3 strategy is what we're doing to keep ourselves safe. So our awareness, if we're having trouble focusing, if we're having trouble keeping track of targets, of multiple things going on, then we're starting to lose things. We're starting not to notice things. And things that go unnoticed are dangerous. We're missing things. The assessment phase, where we make decisions on what we're aware of. Well, if we're not aware of the stuff, we can't really make decisions on it, can we? Our judgment is also limited. So in situations where you may have been able to think of 6 or 7 options to take care of a potential hazard, you might only be able to think of 1 and 2. And those might not be the best ones. So we're limiting our options now. We're having problems remembering things. So you might have been aware of a car coming up to the side street, but then you look somewhere else and you got the car was there. And we have trouble keeping track of multiple targets. In the action phase, everything is slowed down. It's gotten more difficult to do things. This is one of my favorites. The bike is suddenly less precise. I see people go, well, when I left the house this morning, the bike was fine, but now the clutch is all screwed up. I don't know what's going on. It's not the clutch. It's you. You're not controlling it the same way you were several hours ago because you're impaired. We're having problems with our balance, our coordination. So everything that we have done to attempt to reduce the hazards, to make it more safe for us to ride, we have just made more difficult. We've thrown most of it away, ignored it. Now when you add drugs into the mix, things begin to change because drugs compound the impairment. They can make one drink feel like 2 or 3. And when I'm talking about drugs, I'm not just talking about the fun, sexy ones. You know, that are on the news and just say no, all that fun stuff. I'm talking about cold medication, right? Allergy medicine, blood pressure medicine, hypertension medicine. Obviously, there's the illegal stuff you shouldn't have, and the recreational stuff, or whatever they added to the Red Bull this week. Now, anyone know what marijuana is currently classified in the state of Pennsylvania?
Illegal.
It's for medicinal use only.
Right, it's medicinal. It's a class 2 medicinal. So, yeah, unless you have a prescription for it, you're not supposed to have it. Even if you have a medical card, even if they have removed the THC or whatever, the part that makes you high, there are still limitations on when you can use it and what you're allowed to do within certain time periods after taking your dose. Right? So getting in the car and lighting up and then driving is actually against the law, even if you have a medical card. Now, the effects have been amplified, so we're making things even harder on ourselves, which means we're missing even more things. Our judgment and our skills are out the window, but we don't realize this because we still think we're okay. I do this all the time. It's not a big deal. I've got a high tolerance. I'm cool. Now, everyone's body gets rid of the stuff at different rates. So if you do take regular medications, know how it affects you, know what it mixes and doesn't mix with, and know kind of what time frames are. I had a gentleman about 2 months ago. He's on blood pressure medicine. And he was on it for about 2 years before he suddenly read something that said that he wasn't supposed to be operating a motor vehicle within a half an hour of taking the medicine. Something his doctor never let him know. So things like that, do not operate heavy machinery after you've taken this. That's a big deal. So when we're impaired, what do we do about it? Well, the simple solution is don't drink and drive. Don't drink and drive, whatever. If you go out, have a plan. An alternative method. Wait until it wears off. I've done that a lot. I'm going to stop now and hang around until in a couple of hours I'll be ready to go. Depending upon how much you've had, that could take a couple of hours. Maybe have an alternate plan. Somewhere to stay. Someone else to get the bike home for you. In Okinawa, Japan, they have zero tolerance cab teams. You're out on night, you've had a little too much, you call for a cab. 2 guys show up. One drives you home and one drives the bike home. So you know the bike is home and safe. That, I think, is awesome. It's a shame we would never be able to get that off the ground here in the States. Because I know too many guys that will not let anyone else touch their bike. So, this brings us to Smart Rider commitment number 8. I acknowledge that many fatal motorcycle crashes involve riders who have been drinking. I accept this fact and commit to separate the use of alcohol and other drugs from riding a motorcycle. I commit to riding sober. If this is a commitment you feel comfortable making to yourself, your family, and loved ones, please memorialize it however you see fit. Now, sometimes you're not the problem, it's the guys you're with. And you may have to step in to protect them. Well, the process is still the same. Right? We have a plan. We find another way to get them home. Dude, there's my couch. Cut them off. You're out at a bar, you tell the bartender, no more for him. Bartenders will do that. They don't want to get in trouble. you may have to secure the motorcycle. I've seen this happen where a group of riders go out, and there's a couple of them that they just don't trust. And they'll park the bikes in such a way that those riders can't move the bikes without everyone else moving. They get boxed in. And I say, yeah, we're not letting them go until we're sure they're okay to ride. You might have to take their keys. Okay? Again, bartenders will help you with this. They usually have a spot behind the counter that they keep keys. They'll hide them from the drivers. You might have to get help. Right? If you're with a group, the group might have to peer pressure the person who's having a problem. I have a group of guys. We get together every Sunday night, hang out, and 3 years ago, we were sitting, and one of them, he really loves his Fireball, and he had a bottle of it when he showed up, and we were sitting in the night chatting, making fun of each other, all that fun stuff that guys do. And at the end of the night, he stood up and stumbled, and that's when we discovered that there was this much left in the bottle. And it's oh my God, when did he drink all of that? We didn't notice. You noticed? I didn't notice. I don't know if it wasn't my job to watch him. When in the world did he drink almost the entire bottle of Fireball? Anyway, it was like, no, dude, you're not driving home. There's no way we're letting you out of this house. I should note, my friend is 6'3", about 290 pounds. It took 3 of us about 45 minutes to convince him to hand over his keys, and it almost came to blows twice. We actually were wondering if we were going to have to tackle him to the floor. During that, heard one of the greatest comments ever, and you're going to hear it from your friends if you haven't said it yourself at some point. He looked at us and said, thanks, guys. I know you're thinking about me. You're right. I shouldn't be driving, but I'm okay. Do you realize how stupid you just sounded? Give us your keys. Because when you're out with a group of people and one person in that group is impaired, it puts everyone at risk. Because if he goes down, he's not just going to take himself. If you cannot convince the group to help you stop the guy from getting on his bike, you may have to make the hard decision to go home by yourself. All right, I'm going to hang out a little bit longer. I'm going to have something else to eat. I'm going to go another way home, whatever it is. I'm going home by myself. You guys go, and hopefully I will not see your names in the news tomorrow morning. But I'm going to go home to keep myself safer by myself. Which brings us to commitment number 9. I acknowledge that an impaired rider in the group puts me at risk. I accept this fact and commit to avoiding riding with others who are impaired. So if this is a commitment you feel comfortable making to yourself, your family, and loved ones, please memorialize it however you see fit. All right. So let's face it, drugs and alcohol are the sexy ones that everyone talks about, but there are other things that impair us. Like being too tired, being stressed or upset, being pissed off, even being too happy can be an impairment because it distracts you from paying attention to your surroundings. If you're too hot or too cold, you're going to be thinking or fixating on that instead of what you need to do to stay safe. Communications devices, right? Cell phones. Health problems. Okay? If you have a cold, if you have a sore back, if you have a bad joint, those are all going to distract you from riding. Allergies can mess up your riding experience. And let me tell you, from a health perspective, sneezing in your helmet sucks. As we get older, things naturally begin to slow down, or things don't do what we want them to do. As I said before, I teach at several different sites. One of the sites I teach out of Lancaster, the bikes they have there, they actually have, Harley tried a couple of years ago to make entry-level bikes, little small ones. They're still enormous. But whoever designed them apparently never actually sat on a bike before, because they are the most uncomfortable things I've ever been on, and my hip just does not like sitting on. Being overconfident is an impairment. Hey guys, watch this. Or, to use today's vernacular, hold my beer. Underconfidence is also an impairment, because now you're too afraid to do or push the bike where it needs to go in order to survive whatever the problem is. So when we're dealing with impairments, as I mentioned before, the first thing that's impaired is our ability to recognize that we're impaired. But it's important that we do recognize that fact. Oops. So one thing to key in that you're having a problem is if you see or have too many surprises. Where did that come from? I didn't notice it. Why didn't I notice that? The bike is not as smooth as it normally is. Why is my clutch all screwed up? Why is my brake jumpy? Why is my steering all... It's not the bike, it's you. And we begin to slow down. It takes us longer to do things. I should have been able to do that in time. Right? I saw that stick and I still ran it over. Why in the world didn't I turn the bike? These things are all indicators, things to signal to you that you are having a problem. So once we recognize that we are having the problem, we have to deal with it. And one of the simplest ways is to give yourself more time. Slow down, increase your following distance, increase your space cushions. Give yourself more time to react. If we are prepared for the weather and the situations, we're less likely to be too hot or too cold. You might have to rest. Right? This is a big thing. On the motorcycle, you are more engaged in driving the bike than you are with your car. I mentioned this before. The car pretty much drives itself. You're just making fine-tuned adjustments. On the motorcycle, you're trying to pay attention to everything. You've got your different limbs doing different things at the same time. So you get tired faster. I can get in my car right now and drive from here to Boston, and I will stop maybe for gas and maybe grab a bite to eat. And that's it. Just long enough to grab those things, I'll get back in the car. But if I go on my motorcycle, I am going to stop at every rest stop I go past. I'm going to get off the bike, I'm going to stretch, I'm going to fit some knee bends, some back stretches, work the kinks back out, loosen up again, because that 30, 45 seconds helps rejuvenate my body so that I'm ready to continue riding. You might have to get something to eat or drink, right? Because you get more dehydrated on the bike. You get hungry on the bike because you're doing more. You might need to take a nap. I've seen this several times at rest stops. Riders doing long distance, they'll park the bike, they'll sit down, they'll lie down on a bench, they'll lie down next to the bike, they'll take a 15, 20-minute nap. Reinvigorate themselves. Which brings us to commitment number 10, that I acknowledge that there is a wide variety of factors that can impair my ability to ride safely. I accept this fact and commit to minimizing factors that can negatively affect my riding ability and performance. If this is a commitment you feel comfortable making to yourself, your family, and loved ones, please memorialize it in however you see fit. So let's review. What are 3 indicators of impairment?
Like loss of control of the bike.
Right. Bike's hard to control. That's one. Good. What's
Slow reaction time.
Yep. You slow down. And what's the third? Things begin to surprise you. You didn't notice something. What are 3 examples of impairments?
Sleep deprivation.
Okay.
Or
Fatigue, being tired. Yep.
Alcohol and drugs.
Alcohol and drugs. Okay. What's another one?
Mood.
Yes, your mood. What percentage of fatalities are alcohol related?
34.
34%. Yes. How does riding under the influence affect the A3 strategy?
You're not going to assess the situation correctly because you're impaired.
Right. So think a little bigger. Everything that we're doing to keep ourselves safe in the A3 has been affected, slowed down, or nullified. Right. So our awareness isn't there, our assessment isn't what it needs to be, and our actions have slowed down or have disappeared. What are some of the ways to intervene to prevent a friend from riding under the influence?
Take their keys.
Take their keys, yes.
Lock their bike in.
Yeah, block the bike.
Get a lot of people to try to help intervene in the situation.
Yeah, peer pressure. Just, dude, we're not letting you go anywhere. Yeah.
Physical strength.
Good. Someone started to say something?
Physical strength. You might have to hold them down sometimes.
That might become necessary in worst case scenarios. I've been there a couple of times. But yeah, stop serving them, have an alternate route home, have an alternate way to get them home, give them a lift, have them stay somewhere, or just wait out for them to sober up. All right, so let's talk about vehicle codes, laws. Laws exist to keep us safe. Laws exist because someone did something somewhere and they want to make sure that doesn't happen again. Sometimes laws have unintended consequences, but for the most part, laws' purpose are to keep us safe. So, most highways in the United States have a maximum speed of 70 miles an hour. That is the written law. Maximum speed 70 miles an hour on the highway. This goes for the Turnpike. This goes for Route 70, Route 80, sections of 95. Even some of the road, I think 222. Yeah. But anyway, most highways, maximum speed is 70 miles an hour. However, the basic speed law states that you never go faster than what is safe for conditions. All right? So think about that. Never go faster than what's safe. So, on the Turnpike in February, while it's snowing, is 70 miles an hour a good idea?
No.
70 miles an hour may be the posted limit, but it is not a good idea because conditions do not warrant 70 miles an hour. So never go faster than conditions should allow for. It's amazing we have to say this, but don't text. Okay? Texting in a car is bad enough. If you're on the bike trying to do this, you're just another level of idiot. Lane splitting. Anybody know what lane splitting is?
Going in between cars.
Correct. So you have 2 lanes with cars and you're going up the center. Okay. Let me say, right here, absolutely. Get your pens ready. Here's the notes. In the state of Pennsylvania, absolutely, lane splitting is illegal. You are not allowed to do it under any circumstance in the state of Pennsylvania. Are you allowed to do that? That's a no-no. In fact, in 47 of the 50 states, lane splitting is illegal. There is only 3 states that allow it to happen, and none of them are near us. Yeah, California, Utah, and Montana. and they are only allowed to do it under certain circumstances. So anytime you see a motorcycle move up the lane to get to the front at a red light, or during traffic goes between the two cars, they are putting themselves in extreme risk of injury, and they are breaking the law. Because someone's going to get hurt. All right. Riding side by side. How many motorcycles can legally occupy the same lane next to each other?
2.
That's
No.
one.
Yeah, the answer is 2. So, while it's legal, it's not recommended. But legally, bikes can ride side by side. Think about parades or motorcades or processions. Those riders tend to practice. They know each other, they know what they can do, they know what their bikes can do. They've gone through it before in more controlled, open situations before they get on the road. For safety on the road, we stagger, because when you're side by side with someone, that limits where you can go if there's a problem. So staggering is the safest, but legally you can put 2 next to each other. Just don't do it that often. I've been on charity rides and things where I prefer to stagger. If I know the rider I'm next to and I know what their skills are, for instance, I know several of the other instructors, I would probably have no problem riding side by side with them. But most of my friends and things, while we'll pull side by side at the red light to have a quick talk, one of us goes first, and that keeps us safer. Now, we mentioned before about the ride on red law. Okay, the going through when the light doesn't see you, as well as the turn right on red, unless otherwise stated. Keep in mind, that's not everywhere. Not every state has that. But there is one ride on red law that is universal to all states, all intersections that have red lights. And that is if the light is not functioning. If the light is not functioning, what happens at the intersection?
Becomes a stop.
Right. It becomes a 4-way stop. That is the only universal ride on red law. Now, specific laws for Pennsylvania have to deal with our permits. In order to go out and ride and practice on the road, you must have, to ride on the road, you have to have an M class. Now, you can have an M class with endorsements. Actually, Pennsylvania doesn't do that. They call it something else, but we have restrictions. But other states, an M class is an endorsement. We actually can have an M class without having the car license. You can have restrictions on your license, like an M8, which means you're only allowed to drive a motor-driven cycle, or an M9, you're only allowed to drive a 3-wheel. An M class can drive all of them, but some people, because of comfort or physical restrictions, can get an M9 or an M8, and they're only allowed to drive that particular style, not the 2 wheels. Your permit, you are restricted to daylight hours. You cannot ride at night. You must have a licensed operator in attendance. Okay, now, if you have a driver's license, you are the licensed operator. Okay? Every once in a while we run into a situation where a person, like in the city, does not have a driver's license, but they want to get a motorcycle license. They have to have a driver with them in attendance because someone has to be legally allowed to ride on the road. But if you have a driver's license, you're that person. You're not allowed to carry a passenger. And you are required to wear a helmet. If you're under the age of 18, you need 6 months of practice on your permit. Yeah, we got a couple on this call, in fact. So you have to have 6 months worth of riding practice on your permit before you're allowed to take the test. You must have 65 hours of riding practice that a parent needs to supervise. You must take this course and pass it. And this course counts for 15 of those 65 hours. In the state of Pennsylvania, you are required to wear a helmet. Unless, I love laws that do that. Oh my God. State of Pennsylvania requires you to wear a helmet unless certain criteria are met. And that criteria is that you are driving a 3-wheel enclosed cab like a slingshot. You are over the age of 21 with either 2 years of riding experience or you've taken and completed this course. So, let me spell it out so that there's no confusion. Once you have completed this course successfully, except for those of you under 18, you are no longer required by law to wear a helmet. However, I hope that during this class we have shown you the importance of keeping yourself safe, but I am not allowed to lecture you on that. You're adults, you have to make your own decisions. I will say, I'm a fan of irony. Last August, the state of Florida repealed its helmet law to where they no longer require helmets in Florida. For those who drive out of state, by the way, know that Maryland and New Jersey do require helmets. No ifs, ands, or buts. Delaware does too. New York, there are restrictions. But anyway, Florida repealed their helmet law. And it should be interesting to note that the lawyer who led the charge to repeal the helmet law was killed last September in a motorcycle accident because he was not wearing a helmet. Like I said, I'm a fan of irony. All right, enough about that, since I'm not allowed to lecture. If you carry passengers, they must have a seat and they must have foot pegs and handholds. Okay, the days of putting them on, balancing them on the handlebars are over. And if you carry cargo, it must be secured. Okay, you must have a luggage rack, saddlebag is tied to the seat, it's strapped to your back, a backpack, a tank case, something that holds it in place. You cannot have it loose, it cannot shift or move, you cannot balance it or carry it in your lap or your arms. It must be secured. And your license plate, your registration, must be readably horizontal. Okay? There are some classic bikes that the license plate mounted vertically on the fender. They make special license plates for that. So when you're registering your motorcycle, there's a little box that says vertical registration. Unless your license plate is designed to be up and down, don't mark that or you're going to get the wrong license plate. Okay? Because you can't turn the license plate, you have to get one that's read horizontally even though it mounts vertically. And that does it for tonight. So, let me open it up to group now. Anybody have any questions? Something they want more information about or delve deeper into?
No.
Hello? Nope.
No.
No.
I'm sorry, say again?
Not really.
Okay. All right. That's valid. Okay. So cool. All right. So that finishes up the information here. So let's talk about the next couple days. So tomorrow, all right, I've got the group riding from Tuesday. You're going to show up the range tomorrow, including Nick. We're going to get you back on that day. Now that we got all your stuff sorted out. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, we need to take the written test. So that means arriving no later than 7:15. Okay? If you feel like you need more time, yes, I will be there earlier. I get there probably about 10:07, depending upon traffic. So I'll be there setting things up. 7:15 at the latest. You'll come. You'll take the written test, 50 questions, multiple choice, and then once you're done that, once we're done that, we'll get suited up and then we ride for the day. Same thing will happen to the group on Friday. 7:15 arrival time. Again, I'll be there before then if you feel that you need the time, or some people just get test anxiety. If that's you, that's fine. Show up a little earlier. We'll get you started earlier. Not a big deal. Don't beat yourself up. And we'll go from there. All right? So the next riding day gets a little more intense, but a lot more fun. So be paying attention to the weather. At the moment, forecast for tomorrow is sunny and low 80s. Forecast for Friday is overcast, mid-80s. That was as of about 3 or 4 hours ago. So with the way the weather's been, that means that it's going to be hail and 1.5 foot of snow. So keep an eye on that. Let's remember, dress for the conditions. Have refreshments for yourself. Need them. You all know how you felt coming off day one. Day two is going to be even more so. But that's it. That's all I got for you tonight. So if there's nothing else,
We'll see you tomorrow.
see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
See you Friday.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.
I just have one question.
Sure.
How long is the written?
How long is it?
Yeah, like how many questions is it?
50.
Oh, fun. Okay. All right. I'll see you
50
tomorrow.
page essay. No, it's 50 questions, multiple choice.
Okay.
Okay?
Bye.
All right. Bye.